again, and thank you for joining us for the second day of the EXtremeClimTwin Final Conference. It's the parallel session that we are currently sitting in, and it's the session on research, support, development, management, and nurturing in every possible way. So this is something that we all need. This special session is part of the Work Package 1, Management and Coordination, and a special task which is dedicated exactly to strengthening the research support capacities, which in the case of the Faculty of Sciences, University of Novi Sad, means primarily the International Relations and Project Office, Legal Office, Accounting Office, and every other possible structure that is in the loop, let's call it like that. Yesterday we talked about research, development, and training processes, how to keep up a good training scheme in-house, how to offer the research community with more skill set that they need to do good research, and how to help them get the burden off the paperwork, and to help them develop the project and talk to them about the idea. And I presented the success story of our roadmap for the development of this structure of research support. And hopefully we'll get there in 6 to 5 years. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think we gain the momentum. So the things will unroll as we expect. Today we have a bit of a combination on the agenda. First, we will hear our colleague Adam Warren, who is Research Development Manager from Research and Innovation Office at Loughborough University. And Adam will present the importance of internal peer review and review processes. What is to be done when there's a project idea ongoing, how to approach it, how to streamline the processes, some recommendations and good tips that we can maybe copy. And in the second part of the presentation, we'll hear more about budgeting from our colleague Alpa Mistry, who is a research support officer in charge of project costing, and she will give us more insight into procedures at Loughborough University. And we'll also hear our colleagues from Faculty of Sciences and Accounting Office, who are one of the pillars that supports this structure in the Faculty of Sciences. So I'm looking forward to their questions, I'm looking forward to their ideas, and sharing your concerns and asking maybe how to do things and how to improve things, or give your views, because it's about sharing and caring. So thank you very much. I'm giving the floor to Adam right now, and we'll just switch to screen sharing of the presentation. Okay? Yeah. I can. Okay, well, thank you, Gordana, for that introduction, and yeah, thank you again for hosting me and Alpa this week and the hospitality. Yeah, we're going to, in this part of the session, I'm going to focus on internal demands management, of which peer review is an important part. I'm just waiting. Okay, yeah, so what I'm focusing on in this session is internal demand management processes for research proposals, our experience of doing this at Loughborough University, and as Gordana mentioned, peer review is an important part of this. There are other steps as well. And I'm going to follow this structure here for the presentation. So I'm going to discuss what internal demand management process is, why it matters, why we run them at Loughborough University, what are the prerequisites, what are the barriers, and how do you work around those barriers. I'm going to give some examples and then some summary points. And as Gordana said, this does plug into the roadmap. Go back. Yeah, the roadmap D1.3, improving research development and support activity, particularly the second objective about supporting structures that are involved in proposals at a stage. So there's about 3 of you in the room
just want to ask, and this can just be a show of hands or you can shout out or put them in the chat. Does anybody here know what an internal demand management process is?
Oh, you can guess.
You can guess, or
give an idea.
okay, just
okay. Does it have to do something with recognizing the needs in the institution, what are actually needed as a support at some stage, and I don't know what actually, how many people want to participate in projects and what their expectations or needs? No idea.
It is partly that. Yeah, it is about managing expectations and needs. It is that it's often, it generally is to do with when funders impose a limit, either a hard limit or a soft limit on the number of applications an institution can submit to a certain call. Is how we manage that within the university. If we can only submit 3 proposals to a certain call and there's 10 people who want to lead on them, then it's about the process of managing that. So that's basically what it is. The second question, and again, this is level knowledge, has anyone actually organised one in this group at all?
No.
No. Okay.
Actually, we didn't have much problems with that because we're a small institution, and also our support office is really young, so in a kind of development stage. So for a time, hasn't been much limits imposed on us on how many proposals can we submit to one call. Similar situation we have encountered was NATO projects, because they limit the number of active projects by one beneficiary, but how many proposals we submit is not limited. So we actually didn't have the problem, but I guess as we develop, maybe this will become important.
Well, thank you about that. That's really useful to know. If anybody else has anything to say or contribute, please do shout out or just put in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm happy to break off from the presentation. This is really about what can help you and learning from what we're doing at Loughborough University. So, internal demand management process, it's one definition, this is one that I use. It's an institutional mechanism for managing the number of applications submitted to a specific funding opportunity with a view to putting forward proposals for the highest possible quality. And the last bit's really important. Just because the funder said we can put forward 5 proposals doesn't mean we should be putting forward 5 proposals. We want to make sure we put the best ones forward, and that each one that we do put forward has a really good chance of getting funded, or at least progressing through the stages. So the aim is of the process from an institutional point of view is to increase the quality and the success rate of submitted proposals led by our university, Loughborough University. And for me, what successful rate would look like is that if there's 2 stages to the process, say an outline stage and a full stage, that's the majority of the proposals should proceed to full stage. And beyond that, we should get some through to interview stage if there's interviews, and panel stage, where there's sometimes a panel which does the final assessment and the final ranking of the proposals. Yeah, the UK process is very competitive, and we have to make sure that we do progress reputationally, that we put forward proposals that will have a good chance of at least getting through to the later stages, if not getting funded. And ultimately, we clearly want our success rates to be higher than the funder success rates. Otherwise, it's difficult to justify our jobs. We really need to make sure that what we do exceeds the national average. And overall, we do better than the national average across the research funders. So why run an internal demand management process? Thirdly, because the funder places hard limits, constraints on the number of applications that we can submit as an institution. So there's some major opportunities I've listed there where there's examples where there's a very clear limit. So UKRI, so UK Research and Innovation, the main UK funder, their Future Leader Fellowship opportunities, which are aimed at early career researchers, are limited. Institutions do have a limit, and I'll come back to that in some later slides. EPSRC, which is the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, their Centres for Doctoral Training, which is Centres for Training cohorts of about 50 PhD students, again have hard limits on the numbers that institutions can submit, and I'm going to give that as an example later. ESRC centres, so these are big research centres that conduct lots of research over a 5-year period, and these calls come out every 2 or 3 years. Again, they have a limit on how many we can submit. I think last time it was more of a soft limit, but before that it was actually a hard limit. We were limited to 1, I think, from memory. And NERC's standard grants, which are now known as Pushing the Frontiers scheme, which I did mention yesterday briefly, they have a limit as well, which is based on the quality of previous applications. So the limits may be determined by, the funder can determine them by various ways. So for the UKRI Future Leaders Fellowship, it's by staff FTE submitted to the previous Research Excellence Framework exercise, which is a research quality exercise that UK universities go through every 7 years. For NERC, as mentioned, is by previous success rates. Invariably, these hard limits tend to benefit the larger, better resourced universities because they're more likely to submit more staff to the REF, and often they have more resources in their research offices to support the academics, and therefore their success rate you'd expect generally will be higher. So it does benefit the bigger universities rather than the universities like Loughborough, which are sort of medium, smallish universities by UK standards. So these are examples of some of the hard limits. On the left is the UKRI Future Leaders Fellowship, round 8. This is a round that has just gone. We've submitted our proposal to that and we're waiting the outcome. The limits for this one was defined by submissions to the 2020 Research Excellence Framework, as I mentioned, with the number of Future Leaders Fellowships applications submitted related to the FTE staff numbers, including each institution's rep submission. Now, we submitted in terms of staff numbers about 700 to the rep. So we're down in the lower tier. We were allowed to submit 4 applications from our institution to the Future Leaders Fellowship Scheme. And 19 research organisations, ROs, were in the same position. So there are 19 of us which were submitted 4. The great majority, 95, could only submit 2 because they were smaller universities and they submitted less than 400 staff and brand. But you notice further up at the top, there are 5 research organisations which were allowed to submit 10, so a significantly higher number than Loughborough. And those 5, I can't remember all of them, but Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, Manchester will certainly be there. So they could submit more than twice the number of Future Leader Fellowship applications. And clearly that will benefit them in the longer term. If they get 3 or 4 of those funded, then those are people who can lead on larger bids going forwards. So if we submit 4, the most would get funded probably is 2, which would be great, but it does put us at a continuing disadvantage to the Oxfords, Cambridges, the UCLs. And our near neighbour Nottingham, I know, submitted 8, so we're allowed to submit 8 applications for round 8. So that's the Future Leaders Fellowships. Also on the right-hand side, there's the EPSRC, Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, CDT, so I go get somebody who wants to come to the room. And they define their limits by research income from EPSRC and staff capacity in engineering and physical sciences areas. So again, this benefits the universities that are the biggest engineering faculties and also have the most research income from EPSRC. So we were allowed to lead on 6 CDTs at our line stage, but Imperial were allowed to lead on 21, Cambridge on 14, King's College only 5, and that's a big university. Clearly it's not that huge in engineering terms. So again, the bigger universities with the really big engineering faculties were allowed to submit significantly more CDTs, and that matters because that's training the next generation. Therefore, PhD students, you train a cohort of 50 PhD students together with other universities. So they really are the engineers of the future, the engineering academics of the future. Also, funders impose soft limits, which is more the nudge to submit a reduced number of proposals. So, for example, there's a scheme that's just been published, the UKRI Cross-Council Responsive Mode Pilot Scheme, which is a scheme for proposals which don't fit into a particular research council. So I mentioned it yesterday. So it may be a proposal that combines arts, humanities, and engineering, and you're not really sure where to submit it, then you could go for this scheme. So for this one, the funder has just stated they expect institutions to support high quality bids without giving a specific number. So for us, that's what we'll do anyway, but that may be a promise to other universities just to submit the bids that are really fundable and not to submit speculative bids to that particular call. Another soft limit, probably a harder soft limit, is Leverhulme Early Career Fellowships, where the university has to match the applicant's salary for each of the 3-year duration of the fellowship. And I'll come back onto that one in a subsequent slide. So that can be quite expensive. So again, particularly universities with smaller budgets may struggle with that. Also fellowships where host institutions must state in a head of department letter, or in our case it would be the dean of the school, that candidates have been selected via an internal process. So it needs to be an actual sign-off from the head of department in a letter. So clearly heads of department aren't going to sign some of these letters. They're going to think very carefully about the ones that get submitted by their department, or in our case, by the school. And there's other cases where matches are explicitly stated or inferred. And an example of this, and I'll come back to this, is also the CPTs, where there has to be a particular project partner or a university contribution to the value of X pounds or X PhD students in the case of CPTs. So to give a few examples of soft limits, we've got the Leverhulme Early Career Fellowship, as I mentioned, where the university has to contribute 50% of the fellow's salary costs, and that includes the employer's national insurance, pension, cost and London allowance, where it's applicable, up to a maximum of up to £26,000 in each year of the award. That should have been phrased differently. Leverhulme pay up to £26,000, and then the university has to contribute the rest. And for Loughborough University, that can be quite significant for the duration of 3 years. So if we think about how much a fellowship costs the university, in Loughborough, if you've got somebody on what's grade 7 who is working at Loughborough University London, so you pay the London allowance, then the salary costs, including all the employer's costs, is going to be something like £60,000, maybe a little bit more than that. So the institution cost is going to be about £34,000 a year for the 3 years. So that's over £100,000. It's a lot of money, and that would price some universities out, and it makes universities think very carefully about how many of these they can submit. So in the last round, Loughborough University are actually awarded 3 of these, which did really well, but obviously it does come at a cost. So probably looking back again at the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Centre, Centres for Doctoral Training, CDTs, institutions are required to leverage a minimum of 20% cash contribution towards the total students' cost at cohort 50 from non-UKRI sources. So I think totally worded, what that basically means is that EPSRC will pay for 40 studentships, and the university has to find a resource for the other 10. And the intention is to try and get as much of that funding from non-academic sources as possible, from companies, for example, from governments, organisations, or from third sector, because third sector that got generous reserves, so that the university doesn't have to pay as much. But often private companies want to match something. They're less likely to pay for a full studentship. They'll pay for a match, so the university will pay 50%. They will pay 50%. So the costs there will be financial costs incurred by the university. And think about how much a studentship costs. For 3 years, it's about £74,000 just for the fees and the stipend. The RTSG is the training grant, and that's really at the university's discretion. But say may cost £10,000 over 3 years, so that's £84,000. The studentships usually last more than 3 years, and usually 3.5 or 4 years, because you'd want students to do some training in industry or a placement where they'll get paid. So you're talking probably 90,000 plus per studentship, and there will be 10 of those. So that's a lot of resource. That's getting on for £1 million. That has to be found from other sources, the EPS or CDTs. So those are the limits that are imposed by institutions. But how do we run a demand management process? Firstly, there's some prerequisites which are really important to make it possible at all. There needs to be buy-in from senior management. So for us, the most senior academic who's in charge of research and senior management team is the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. So he needs to be on board. From an operational side, making this happen, the director of our Research and Innovation Office needs to be supported. And at a school level, the ADRIs, the Associate Deans for Research and Innovation, need to be supported, not least because they control the budgets for their schools, so they may underwrite some of these studentships, and it's their staff time. Talk about involved as significant amount of academic time, then they will need to ensure that the academics teaching is covered by other staff or by bought-in staff, so they need to be on board as well. So senior management need to provide the resource. They need to provide salary match in some cases, which each student staff and also access to facilities where that's required. Also, we have something called Operations Committee, where any centrally allocated resource, so PhD studentships which are run by the university rather than by the schools, are allocated. And also things like refurbishment, we want to refurbish as part of any kind of contribution, then that has to be approved centrally as well. So any centrally allocated resource has to go through Operations Committee, and time has to be factored in order to do that. It has to be prepared, it has to be approved, etc. Also, another prerequisite is senior, having on board senior, experienced and appropriate academics. These people will do the internal reviews, which Gordana mentioned in the introduction, which is really important, and they'll sit on internal panels as well. And these will be academics, and we have them, I say a repository, but usually in our heads we know the people for each discipline who have the expertise or the track records to provide advice at a higher level, and their input is invaluable. Another prerequisite is joint working across the research development and research support teams and the wider research and innovation teams. So we do have to pull together, timelines are very tight, so we have to pull together research development managers like myself, research support cosmetics people like Alpa, partnership development managers, contracts team, and research governance and integrity team as well, where there's particular ethical dimensions. So they need to have buy-in from the whole institution in summary. So I'm not going to read through that. Some of those mentioned yesterday that our institution development academic staff, about 250 research staff, and we have about 1,000 PhD students as well. So that's the size of the body that we need to buy in and work with on these proposals. In terms of barriers and mitigations, one of the biggest challenges is the funded timeline. Internal processes can take 4 weeks or so, and that can leave very little time to write the bid if your bid is selected for outline stage. People need to be working on the proposal on the basis, if they're serious on basis that it will go through the internal process. You can't leave it until the internal process is finished. And then trying to actually top. Funded deadlines aren't always great. At the moment, I'm supporting the bid to Expanding Excellence in England, which is Research England scheme. It's a full stage bid, £11.5 million. We found out that the proposal got through to outline stage. We should have found out in middle of May, and it was well into June when we found out. And the full stage deadline is 15th of September. So with holidays, that deadline is extremely tight for the size of the scheme, especially as we're having to get project partner letters of support. And some to some degree we're at the mercy of the project partners, and with people being on holiday, it's going to be a bit of a scramble to get those letters of support. So funding deadlines aren't always helpful if they're in early September or they're in early January. Things are tight. Limited academic capability. I think a lot of universities will say this, especially the smaller and the medium-sized ones. There's only so many academics you can ask to be involved in the proposal in terms of track record and in terms of available time to write the bids, to lead on the bids, and to also support the internal process. There's also limited research and innovation office capacity as well. There's been staff change. There's always staff changes, so you have to try and juggle things around. And there's always more bids than you can actually support. So you do have to prioritise which ones you do support and which ones you get very light touch support. So there's always that call to be made, especially at the moment when UKRI seems to be throwing out dozens of calls almost every week. There's huge calls coming out at the moment. So in terms of the actual process, this is a very simplified version of what we do, and it does vary significantly depending on the call, academic availability, time, etc. But generally, there's a 4-stage process. On the left side, you've got the expression of interest, which we ask people to put in if they're interested. And then there's an internal peer review process where we rank those EOIs and decide which ones we can support, and it's partly motivated by the numbers we're allowed to, but also by quality as well. We don't necessarily fill our quotes with quality. There's enough high quality proposals there. There's also an internal panel which will then review the EOIs to a further extent, and will review any subsequent draft proposals before they're submitted. Even to our line stage, we'll review them at least once, maybe more if we can. And then there's the post-panel stage as well, which can vary, and I'll come on to that later on. So the expression of interest stage. So if a funder issues a call and says we can submit 6 as lead, we will usually communicate that to the school associate dean, deans of research and innovation for the relevant schools, to the funding call and the disciplines involved. We will ask the ADRIs to contact or recommend potential credible applicants who can lead on those, and it's really important that they are credible. It's not somebody who doesn't have a track record. We'll ask the applicants to complete the form, the expression of interest, and send it to our office by an internal deadline. So usually it's within 2 weeks of submitting, sending the emails around the ADRIs. The content of the form will be aligned to the key assessment criteria of the call. We want to make sure it is relevant to what they're doing, that they're not wasting their time. And the length will vary in terms of the response to the questions, whether it's 200 words or 500 words, for example. It will vary depending on the value of the call and also the time available. So some examples of calls where we did issue the EOIs is the E3 one, which I'm supporting, Expanding Excellence in England, which is about scaling up pockets of excellence research that occur in certain localities to across the whole country. So the E3 fund, that was an infrequent call. There's a tight deadline, so the EOI is quite light touch, even though there was over £10 million at stake potentially in terms of the value of the bid. And also UKRI Future Leaders Fellowships, where there's multiple calls, usually one every year or every 18 months. And in those calls, we consider for the fellowships, particularly the fit of the fellow to the host institution, because a large part of it is about aligning to university strategy and also the university training any fellows who are funded.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so the EOI stage, for example, for Future Leader Fellowships, say we'll circulate the person specification that the funder issued, and also our own template to the Associate Deans for Research, and the questions on the templates for the Future Leaders Fellowships were about the outline of the research project. We actually basically submit an abstract, so it's about 500 words. There's a bit on applicants and developments, why is this scheme viable for you? How is it going to develop you? So again, that was about 400 words. We asked about career intentions because that was really important to show that you're developing the person. So that might be 250, 300 words. Asked about collaborations, that was more just a list of non-academic collaborators, mainly they be working with, so could be policymakers, could be industry partners. And we asked about the alignment with Loughborough University. So how does it align with our university strategy, the private strategy, how does it align with the school research? And there's an additional box which is on digital information, where we asked the fellows to outline any career breaks or any mitigating circumstances that might be relevant to their application. So once the people submitted the outline application, the EOI, we asked the schools to put through their internal peer review process. But then once they submitted it, we asked selected academics, research and innovation officer staff, probably includes one or two research development managers, maybe partnership managers as well, and senior management to be involved in reviewing the EOIs and then ranking the EOIs as well. And if the school submitted more than one, we also asked the school dean and the school ADR to track the applications from their school. So we did that, and then it went to an internal panel, which met usually about an hour, meeting a room in the Mistry building where we're based, and they would make a selection based on the track record of the applicants. They would also consider diversity issues as well. So the internal management, the internal panel would consider diversity in terms of makeup. We'd make sure we'd have a mix of people on careers, in terms of career stage there in the panel, and we'd look at the proposals to ensure that diversity was written into them as well. And that where the funder asked for a more diverse list of applicants, that we would try and fulfill that requirement subject to the quality being met as well. Really important that quality threshold was met as well. Once the decision had been made, it will be communicated to the ADRIs and to the applicants, both successful and unsuccessful applicants. For the successful applicants, there will be specific timelines to ensure that they produce drafts when relevant, and to ensure that those drafts would be able to be reviewed by panel members at a later stage prior to submission. And also we circulate the relevant assessments criteria to the panelists as well to help them make those decisions. Also, it's worth noting that the panel meetings, due to post-COVID start working, still work from home on certain days, tended to be hybrid, because everybody in a physical room, some joined us virtually as well. So I've mentioned some of this already. Yes, so selected candidates, feedback was sent, were very clear timelines, and we arranged for subsequent drafts to be sent to at least some of the panel members. The candidates who weren't selected, we did send them feedback. If possible, we identified relevant schemes as well, alternative schemes that they could apply for. And again, where applicable and where we thought it was high quality application, but it just missed out this time, we encourage them to apply for a subsequent round, which also would have to go through another internal process. So we wanted to help develop people wherever possible. Point of views, these are relevant to certain schemes, and this is where people get through to, at a subsequent stage. So if they get through to full stage, we know that a certain number of the full stage applicants will be called for mock interview for certain schemes, such as fellowships, large grants, centres, etc. So we'd start actually preparing for those prior to submission for full stage, because when they get invited to interview, the timelines are often ridiculously tight. Sometimes they get invited and a week later they have their interview. Sometimes they give you 2 weeks, but sometimes it's only a week. So we have to have the people able to prepare them for a mock interview within a few days of the applicants being informed that they're going to interview. So it's really important to align that, organise that at an early stage. So we do approach potential interviewers in advance, and these people are often a mix. They're obviously the really experienced people who may have been funded by these schemes in the past, but also we want to have 1 or 2 early career researchers there as well, just to give that perspective. And also we want to make sure the panel is mixed gender. We try and avoid single gender internal panels where we can. And the purpose of the mock interviews is clearly to be a crystal friend, to ask the tough questions, but also to be constructive as well. So when we do conduct mock interviews, and I was involved in one for a fellowship earlier this year, we try and replicate the interview situation. We conduct it in role when they arrive. We try and mimic what would be said by the funder, sort of welcoming them, being very formal, introducing ourselves in a formal situation. And we use prepared questions that are based on the assessment criteria that we think the funder will ask. But we also have a little flexibility with follow up on candidate responses as well. So if they say something interesting or something even controversial or whatever, we will follow up and say, why did you say that? Why? Etc. So we try and be as rigorous as we can, but we also allow time afterwards to step out of the role, ask the candidate how they thought the mock interview went, and also to give some constructive instant feedback, plus any further advice for the actual interview where we can. Also, after they have been interviewed, we do debrief them as well. At least one of us will go back, probably one of the research development managers, ask them what went well, what could be improved on. We do that regardless of the outcome, and it's more important in many ways if they don't get funded. So it's really important to find out about that and find out how the questions are asked as well. So we do always try and do that. So this is really just to summarise internal demand management. It is a critical part of the research development process, and it's increasingly expected by research funders in the UK because it's so competitive. There's about 150 universities that may apply to some of these large schemes, and obviously funders want to limit or restrict the numbers to an extent because they want to be able to manage things at their end. There's only so many people who can peer review proposals that are submitted, and only so many people who can sit on panels, and they only have a limited amount of time. So the funders want to make their life easy, and we want to make sure that we submit the very best proposals. Yes, and that runs on to the second point, that we ensure the most competitive and credible proposals are put forward by our university. And that follows on to the next point, that we want to manage exposure to reputational risk. I mentioned in the previous presentation that sometimes funders do keep records of applications. They do note if an institution submitting a lot of low quality applications or they're getting lots that are unsuccessful. So we have to make sure that we're not on some sort of informal grey list or blacklist. They don't call it that, but there's various phrases that are used. So we want to make sure the reputation we are seen as a university that submits good proposals, excellent proposals. Also, it's from our end, it permits genuine engagement with academics, senior management. The additional proposal reviews and mentoring and guidance that's available to the academics who apply is really beneficial. It also gives us insight, and the academics as well, into how institutional strategic priorities work at an operational level, how the university makes decisions about which or how they actually put resources into it at a central level. And very importantly, the process doesn't end once a candidate has been selected. We do give constructive feedback, as I said, to those that aren't selected, and we will continue to support senior management as well. Post-submission, we'll continue to support to submission, to interview, but also if they're not submitted, we will support them in trying to find another route to to getting their ideas funded. So that's really it. I'm going to leave it there. That's a photo of the building that we work in, the building. So I'm going to leave it there. Are there any questions?
I can only see that you said good luck with this one, and yesterday you said thank you for listening.
Yeah.
So what I can conclude is this is a serious business, and it really is. It really is. Yeah. And welcome. Firstly, I would like to thank Goga for a really warm reception and lots of lovely help that you've given us, and you really made us feel at home here in Novi. And also to Miroslav, who just popped out, you really have looked after us. So a big thank you to you both. The pleasure is all ours, so trust me. Lovely, thank you. So hi everyone who is on Zoom. So today I'll be talking to you about project costing, developing the project budget and internal approvals. So please do feel free to ask any questions at any time, and also we'll have a couple of discussions as well. So please do either put your questions and answers in the chat, or if you feel free to unmute yourself. So a little bit about me. I have been at Loughborough for almost 10 years now. I first started as an undergraduate in 2013, where I studied international economics. I then joined the finance team in April 2018 as a management accountant. And then last year in March, I joined the research office as a research and innovation support officer. In the research office, I support 6 schools. This includes architecture, building, civil engineering, the Design Creative Arts School, Loughborough in London, Business and Economics, School of Science, and Social Science and Humanities. So here we have a couple of images of Loughborough. On the left, you have the Hazelwood building. This is where the research office is situated, alongside the Vice Chancellor's team and marketing department. And then on the right, you have another campus picture where you can see some of our student accommodation. So a couple of facts about Loughborough. We are consistently ranked a top 10 university in the UK for several years. And this year, we've actually been ranked 7th in the UK. Worldwide, we are #1 for sports, and over 90% of Loughborough research is classed as world leading and internationally excellent from the Research Excellence Framework. So a little bit about our people. We have 3,800 undergraduate places available. However, we've had over 27,000 applications for our places, so we're quite a popular, very popular university. In terms of student numbers, including undergraduate and postgraduate, we have just almost 20,000 in the 22-23 academic year. And the staff numbers, we have almost 3,500 staff, so that's the Loughborough and London campus, with over approximately 1,400 being researchers, teaching and enterprise. So our research team at Loughborough, so we have a senior management and 3 supporting managers, and then we have 11 research officers. So we have the first team on the left, who supports the School of Support, Mechanical Engineering, Aeronautical Engineering, Automotive and Chemical Engineering. Then we have my team in the middle, and as I mentioned, we support Civil Engineering, London, Design, Science and Social Science and Humanities. And then we have a compliance team who are responsible for international funding, studentships and compliance processes. So here we have some data on Loughborough's recent applications for the past few years. So on average, we submit around 800 applications, but just to note, 22-23 is an incomplete year. And on average, around 280 to 300 of these applications are approved. We typically, application-wise, our Wolfson, which is our mechanical engineering school, typically have the highest value applications year on year out. And as you can see from the graph, the drop is due to the impact of COVID.
And then some Loughborough awards data.
Sorry, this is the overall number of, either it's UKRI and other
Overall,
international.
Everything, yeah, UKRI,
Okay, so
European charities, everything.
Yeah, everything.
Okay, thanks.
And then again, same for the Loughborough awards, this includes all data for the past few years. Again, you'll notice that higher value awards typically from our engineering and science schools. And then again, from the graph, you can see that due to COVID, there's a drop and there's a slow increase, but due to like reduction in new applications, a lot of our academics were awarded no cost extensions. So that kind of delayed the new applications and reduced the values going forward. So a bit about our funders. So these are the most popular funders common funders that we work with. So we have the UKRI funders. We have 7 research councils across all different disciplines. And then we also have Innovate UK and Research England. So Innovate UK, they focus on business-led innovation funding in the UK across all the different sectors. And then we have Research England, and they fund research in English higher education sector. Then on the right-hand side, you will see our charities that we work with. So we have the British Academy, and they are the UK's National Academy for Social Science and Humanities. We also have the Royal Society, which funds excellence in science. And then we have the Levy Hume Trust, which funds scholarships for research and education. And of course, we have the European Commission. So at Loughborough, we provide what we call cradle to grave support for our PIs. So we are there at every single stage, from proposal development through to application costing, submission, contract negotiation, then through to award setup, award management, and award closure. So here, I'm going to start talking about our pre-award administration. So here we have an example of a research support request. So if you're a Loughborough PI, you're required to complete this online form, which you have to provide the details about the call that you would like to apply for. So you might question, why do we need to complete this? It's actually departmental policy for the PI to complete this. We cannot actually provide them with a budget unless this form has been completed. So there are a couple of reasons. First is that they're also required to complete an ethical test alongside this. And then we have a number of reasons. So there's benefits to both obviously the research office and to the school. So firstly, we are able to track the applications that are coming through. We are also able to then look at this by departmental, identify which academics are regularly applying, and then this can also, this information is also sent to the school so they can encourage academics to apply if they feel like they're not putting enough applications in. And also we're able to provide them with additional information that they may require before they go through the complete application process, whether this can be from a school point of view. Sometimes they require additional kind of internal approvals, such as being recommended for internal peer review at the initial application stage, or whether this is by providing other resources. So for example, studentships, there might be a requirement that they must get approval before application as opposed to post-award, and things like use of, we have LMCC charges that are kind of for our engineering labs, there are other charges that are involved depending on what the call requires. That really helps at this initial stage for everyone, all relevant people, to identify what information is required at initial stages as opposed to further down the line. So next slide. So we'll just have a little discussion shortly. So what I've provided, and people on Zoom, this will be on the next screen, and people in the room, I've just provided you with a handout. So the form that you saw on the previous screen, when that is submitted, you can receive it in the research office as an email in the form that you have to put in view. So I have an example of a good, a well completed form and a not so well completed form. So what I'd like everyone to do is just have a quick look through, and then we'd like kind of discuss, right, if I were the PI and I'm submitting this form, what information do I need to provide to my research office and why? And then as a research office member, what information do I need, why, and then kind of understanding each of the point of view of, well, we're all in this process together, so how can we both help each other to make it a most efficient and successful project? So I'll just move to the next screen for everyone on Zoom.
Great.
So what you'll see in the top line section, this is a mock example I made up with my own details. Every application has the staff details and the department details. Then they are required to provide the funder, the submission deadline, and a link to the call. Then you are required to complete the institution information, so whether you are leading on the project, another institution is leading on a project, any co-Is that are involved, whether it's same institution or another institution, any international countries, and then you have to provide the details of staffing, travel, consumables, etc. If you'd just like to take a minute to, and hopefully people on Zoom, you can read this, I'm hoping it's vision, so please let me know if we need zooming in or anything.
Can someone confirm, please, that you're okay with the view as it is?
Yeah, it's fine. We can see all the details.
Thanks, Vlad, and thank you. Detail.
Yeah, so this is everything that we receive every time we get a request for support request. This is all the details that we are provided with, but also it depends on how much within the financial details, how much the PI provides. And so on that form, there's lots of boxes where you can put in the figures.
I don't think I actually think that quite often it happens so that the researchers don't even know these details when intending to apply. I believe they just grasp the idea of the call and a vague match or mismatch. Yeah. So that this would not be very welcomed from what I've known from the culture. Dushka, am I right?
Yes, I just wanted to say that the first thing I do before I decide you're going to apply and then call my professor to inform her that you will apply is I calculate cost effectiveness. You know, because no matter what is written in the call, we also have some internal rules which can prevent us during the project to use the whole possibilities of the grant, for example. So I have to, you know,
Match,
yes, and filtrate according to this. And then I decide, should we or not? Are we motivated or not?
You mean financially motivated?
Financially motivated.
Yeah, okay.
Because because whatever the quality of application is, in one moment, if people doesn't have enough motivation with the money, everything will
not gonna work.
yeah. So that's I always do, because as you know, for Erasmus Plus projects at university, we can't use all benefits of the project and all parts of funds. You know, so that's the level that someone from outside of
Exactly.
I think we work in like a different way. So
yeah.
at Loughborough, I'd say the costings are very the PI provides you with an idea of what they would like to spend. And then we go back and say, yes to this X, Y, Z, and then no, actually, please reduce here.
Yeah.
So you have.
Yes, and
So we have a very different approach. So if I just take you through this, so from a research office point of view, I'd say example 2, that is what I would say is an ideal version as a research officer of what I would receive, because it literally provides every single information. So in terms of, we'll take it from the institution, so that's been correctly filled. So they have the person from the School of Science. So on the previous one, there's no information. So every time there's missing information, that's something I have to go and find out from the PI directly, because we have so much staff, I can't find that PI on the system. It's just not plausible. So things like that would require me to go back to the PI and say, okay, please can you provide these details for your co-I? And then again, if we have any external partners from a different institute, well, providing just their name, but not providing the institute they're from, again, there's a whole layer of complication, because it's our job responsibility to reach out to the other institute that they're collaborating with. So by having all this information in advance, it just makes that process a lot smoother. So this is what we kind of try to send out to the academics and say, please fill this, please complete this, and then we can start our process much faster. And again, when you look at the individual costing element, so if you look at the RA details, so for research associates, providing the FTE, something as simple as including that on the form.
Can we just elaborate? RAs are research associates. RA details, grade 6.34, one full-time equivalent.
Full-time equivalent.
Just to give a glossary for everyone to understand. So,
So our grade 6 is our standard grade for our research associates at Loughborough. So even if they just put RA, we don't need a grade. It's more the FTE. Is the most important thing, and literally including your co-I. How much time are they spending on the project? How much time is the PI spending? I have received application forms where everything is blank except for the PI name. And from my point of view, I can't provide a costing if I have no details. So I think I can understand when you're in a rush, you're like, okay, let me submit it, because I just need to get it out there, which is completely understandable. Not every single application will be done with lots of time. You hear the opportunity at the last minute. A project partner has asked you at the very last second, oh, would you like to collaborate? And that's completely understandable. But for those where you do have time, we would prefer, we have a process. So I think that makes a difference. And even things like the travel details, the consumable details, providing that in advance actually gives us a chance to compare to funder guidance and say, actually, yes, this cost is eligible. No, I'm really sorry, this is not funded in this call. Whereas if we have to wait, as much as it's really great, talking over the phone, getting everything sorted, I would say a lot of people, in my experience, prefer to have the initial costing, then go to a meeting with that initial draft in the first place, because it makes it so much more effective. Of course, if the costs are going to change, that's not so much of the issue, but it's the initial because it's wonderful when you send a costing report the first time, all information provided, and the PI comes back to you and says, yes, let's go, I'm happy. But that's only possible if that information is provided at the initial stages rather than further down the line. And it's a lot of back and forth between both. So again, PIs have limited time. So you don't want to increase your own workload as well. So I think it's really important that if you are requested information and just putting a bit of time to think about it. So I think another thing I'd like to highlight is we receive the same information about the call as the PI does. That website, we don't receive anything extra. So actually thinking, if you can have a look at the finance section and understand really what they're asking of you, that will really help, because, okay, we have our knowledge and expertise, but for each call, there's different requirements, and we are learning as we are going along. So we can't always provide much more information than that is on that website. So that's quite important, and I think it's just, we're always there to help, but if you have that knowledge, you'll be so much more confident when you're applying, so I think that's really, really a key point, I would say. Do we have any comments or questions from anyone online? Or experiences?
No, I think you've answered them all.
Yeah.
No, actually, experience we have recognized that we need this kind of application form for our projects. About a year ago, our scientific consult has reached a decision and accepted a form of that form, but it's hard to influence the culture again. Usually we find out that there is a project after it has been awarded. They somehow bypass the ICPO. So not all people follow the procedure that is kind of recognized by institution. We want to apply this. And it takes time, I guess, to impose these procedures. Not to impose, but to accept, really.
I think it's a cultural change within the institution,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes, it took us a lot of time here to come up with a very simple online ID project form, which later on becomes your implementation tool and communication tool with the people. And it is the PI's obligation to take care of it on the go. And once it's finished, it's archived, but it stays there in the base forever. And you can extract a little PDF to get the information, like quick info on the project. It's very simple, but it took us almost 3 years to put it up and running, and now it's there, and it takes time to fine tune the form as well. We'll get the feedback from the research community and see where the bugs are and what we can debug and see if it's what we had initially in mind. Yeah, great. I mean, this is.
I would like to add something.
Yeah, sure.
From my experience, but not from the faculty, because this form is new, set up on the 1st of June. But from university e-form, there was, I mean, some questions was so important to be asked at the beginning, because it's, you know, I set up everything according to this. Maybe I will find it later during preparation of proposal, and it would be late, or, you know, I would have some difficulties to correct and edit work packages according to that. But it's also a guideline for project preparation and save my
Exactly, you knew where to focus.
Yes, definitely. Because it was the question, should we get through the accreditation process of some non-degree program that we were developing? And if they didn't ask me, I would say, okay, whatever this project coordinator said, but they precisely asked yes or no. And then I asked them at the early beginning, you know, should we? And I got an email where they stated, no, it's not necessary. And when the project started, they told us we should perform accreditation process, you know, because they want added value. And it's a way how they are telling us, you know. And I said, okay, sorry, but it was written, and I sent that. And I also sent to you this letter, this small PDF that I just clicked and got, So it actually saved us a lot of work. Maybe we perform accreditation, but for more money. No.
Exactly, which you don't
The
get
budget line.
which you have budgeted at the very beginning.
Yes.
True.
Yeah, I do think, sometimes having quite a rigid structure can be a disadvantage as well. I definitely agree. But I would say with the nature of like UKRI funding, this model tends to work quite well. I think it's more suited for this model as opposed to perhaps international funding. I would say it definitely works in line with that more.
Great.
So our next discussion, developing a good budget. So in a moment, I'll show you a simplified version of a budget. And I want us to think about, does this budget comply with funder guidance, which I've made up as a little scenario, and then thinking about individual cost elements. So we use directly allocated costs. These are common terms used in the research office. And I think sometimes it's not everyone knows, so it's important to know those terms. And then budget constraints, modifying your budget. So I'll just talk quick background about the classification of costs. So we have directly incurred costs. These are things, your travel costs, your consumable and your research staff costs. So these are things that are track auditable, verifiable, and they are only incurred if the project is taking place. Then we have our directly allocated costs. This is what we refer to as overheads. So this is your estates cost, your infrastructure technicians, your PI time and your co-I time. So these are typically pool or shared costs. You can't individually track these costs. And estates that include things like rent and utilities, so the overall running costs. Then we have indirect costs. So these are your central administration costs. So that includes HR, finance, and your favourite people, the research staff. And then exceptional items. So these are your directly incurred costs, but they're funded at 100%. And then you have full economic costs, which are a combination of your DI, DA, indirect, and exception costs. The overall includes all elements of your costings. And here's just a very simplified budget version of how we do our budget. The UKRI funding, always you have 100% budget, and commonly they are funded at 80%, so you only receive 80% contribution, and the remaining 20% has to be covered by the university. So here I have an example budget for you. The budget specification is that it's a 12-month maximum duration. You're allowed to ask for up to £450,000 at 100%, and that will be funded at 80% FEC. So you've requested a total of 15,000 for consumables and 25 for travel. You have requested 2 research associates at full-time, which equates to 140,000. Then you have co-I and PI time. So as you can see, the 100% budget, the total adds up to 480,000, and then you have your 80% contribution. So my first question is, does this comply with funder guidance? Which anyone want to answer?
Wait,
Have a quick read, and then let me know. Well, very
Calculated. Conference travel, accommodation, directing your staff.
Non-accounting people.
Yes, is everything, yes.
Yeah, all costs are eligible. However, the only thing that doesn't comply is the overall total limit. It is 30k over the maximum budget. So if you were in this scenario, how would you approach reducing your budget? Any thoughts on how you would tackle this?
How I would reduce.
Yes, in order to fit within the budget limits. This. Okay.
Yeah, consumables.
Yeah.
That hurts the least.
Yes.
But they need it.
Yeah, but
yeah, it is needed. So I'd say my first point would be you can't touch overheads. unfortunately.
Mm.
So that's something you have to effectively ignore from the budget. Then you're looking at the remaining items, which is your directly incurred costs. So if we went with staff costs, of course you can reduce the time for your co-Is or PIs or your research associates. However, you have to consider an RA's technique is usually quite integral to the whole project process. By reducing their time on the project, is this still going to work overall? And then you have the other element of actually, in terms of employability prospects, is this role attractive enough? If you've only got someone for 1 day a week, that might not always attract someone that you want, and actually, is this effective for the budget? So there's so many different things like that to consider. So typically, I would say going for your travel costs and your consumable costs, those are kind of the easiest things to reduce and play with without impacting the overall project. And I think it's going, the simple things, travel, can you find cheaper travel? That might be an option, and that will hurt your project a lot less compared to reducing the staff time. So I think that's quite important to consider.
Yeah, it's work on staff. If you are going to make cuts, it would be investigator time, because that's, yeah.
And you can't do without that one.
Yes, so you wouldn't have a senior professor on a project for 20% of their time, that'd be very unusual. So they put that down, then you cut that back right back to 10% or even 5%.
Yeah, I'd say it's very common for the higher professors to just be a 5%.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, RA, you'd want to keep that, my rule of thumb is not less than 12 months in terms of contract duration, because if there's anything less, you really struggle to employ somebody good.
Yeah.
And the other thing on RA time is with the time taken to recruit and set up, I always advise not starting until month 2 or month 3 of the project, because you're unlikely to get somebody in post ready to go on month 1 when you've often got very tight lead-in times. So that's something else I usually advise.
Great. So now I'll talk a little bit about our internal approvals. So at Loughborough, in order to have your actual budget approved, you have a process called the RX2. I think that's just the name of the form on the system, really. So we use Aggresso as our financial accounting system, and the costing specific process we use is called CPAM. This is where we do all our research costings and all the approvals are going to take through CPAM. So in terms of timelines, budget needs to be approved by the school, so whether that's the dean, an ops manager, operations manager, or an ADRI, 2 days before the final funder submission deadline. And with the RX2 process, the research office, we submit the final draft of the budget to the school, and they will look at PI time, they'll look at the travel and consumable costs, and they'll look at overhead recovery, because again, majority of ours are UKRI, so only 80% contribution. And if you've got things like charities, so typically for UK charities, no overheads, there's no overhead costs, so that's fully funded by the school, so they really have to take in the workload, the overhead recovery costs. And then again, I think you're thinking about project partner approvals. You might have if you have a short turnaround time project, but you've got a co-I in another institution at another university, you have to consider them too will have their internal processes. You need to get their budgets well in advance, make sure that your research office staff has the budget in time so they can combine all the budgets to get all budgets complied with the guidance. And then again, making sure that all university partners' internal processes have been approved for that. So application submission. So the UKRI, we use the JAS portal. However, this is now being changed to the UKRI funding service. So of course, it's a very similar kind of process, but it's a brand new kind of system that we're going to be using that's meant to kind of simplify the process and make it a lot easier to do the application forms. So at Loughborough, the overall timeline for a project, so we have you must submit your request to the research office 10 working days in advance of the final submission funder deadline. You are then required to have your final application ready 2 days in advance of the funder deadline, alongside your RX2 budget approval from the school. And this is to kind of ensure that the research office has the chance to review your application and make sure everything's included. I think we've got another question on it.
You know, thank you very much. I have to leave for another meeting at 2 p.m. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we need to interrupt this. Yeah, okay, thank you for being with us.
So again, with UKRI applications, there are always a number of attachments that you need to submit with the application. So this is whether it's head of department approval letters, case for support, your justification of resources, and any project partner in industry partner letters. So again, with each individual attachment that you have, you need to allow time for the other party who's required to sign, date, approve that letter, to actually give them time to complete that task, and then for you to be able to attach that letter or attachment on the system, and then allow time for your research office to also review that. So that's the kind of process in Loughborough, that we review every single attachment before submission. So head of department, you need your dean to sign the letter, case support. So our RDMs, they support the support reviewing this and giving advice. And obviously this can be quite a lengthy piece of work. So it's taking into consideration, have I allowed enough time for everything without creating too much stress for yourselves and rushing and then not being able to provide a quality application. And again, justification of resources. At Loughborough, the research office, we have to check this. So it's not allowed to be submitted without our approval. And again, if you need any project letters, so making sure you even have enough time to attach this. In December, there was a project that I was supporting, and it's a very well-established academic. So we had a considerable number of project partners and co-Is and collaborations. And it was fun. It's a multi-million-pound project, and the amount of time it took him to upload every single attachment, it's not an easy job. You might think, oh, it's quick, but simple things like taking into consideration, are the margins correct? Are the font size correct? All of this impacts the overall process. And with UKRI, if your attachments are in the incorrect format, they will send your application back further down the line, or in some cases, they've even rejected applications purely because the formatting has been wrong. I think Kelly mentioned that she had one that's been rejected, so that has happened at Loughborough.
Yeah.
That due to formatting issues, the whole application has been rejected. So it's very important. It might seem a bit of an inconvenience, but in the long run, you're saving yourself from more work and the stress of, oh my God, has my work now not been, not successful from a simple administrative reason.
Right.
And you really want to avoid that sort of thing. So taking the time to do everything, it's important. And having that communication from research office to PIs, it's important, especially when you're involving project partners, because then it's double the communication that's required as well. So now I'm going to talk about post-award research administration. So you've now been awarded, so congratulations. And now it's time to consider internal approvals in getting your award. So if you are following UKRI, everything is done on the JED or new system. So it's much easier to follow that system. You'll get a notification, the research office will complete their part, the academic, they need to complete anything, everyone will be notified. So it's a much more simple process to follow. And also in terms of contractual obligations, UKRI grants, they we have already like pre-approval signed by the legal team. So we don't have to look at every individual one as much, it's like a standard terms and conditions. But if you have a what I'd call a non-standard grant, so the terms and conditions, so for us it's like non-UKRI ones, so whether this is through one of our charities, such as Loughborough or Society, or whether this is with the European Commission, every single award letter, terms and conditions has to go through the contract scheme. So we actually have we have a small team actually, and they are very, very busy and they work very, very hard.
Yes.
They really, really do. But I think it's so important to get that information to them as soon as possible. So for Loughborough processes, the PI will contact us with their award letter and term and condition details, and then it's my responsibility to then pass that, submit. We have a submission, again, we have another form that we submit that goes to the research contracts team. So again, they can track all the work, because they have a separate system where they track all their cases for this time, for all the contracts on. So that's really important, because we have, so for example, I had a recent example for the Loughborough Early Career Fellowship, and there was a lot of urgency to be like, oh, we need to send the confirmation that we're accepting the award back. Real rush, oh, we only have 3 weeks to get get everything back to the funder. However, we can't just rush into this. And the main reason is we need to protect ourselves as a university. We don't want to be facing unlimited liability. So of course we want you to have the award. Of course it's very important, but the work that the contracts team does is critical, ensuring that everyone is protected and that we are not accepting unfavorable terms, whether it's like IP or liability. There's so much more to consider than I need to start my project, because you just don't want to put yourselves at risk, really. And so I think that that's really important to consider. And then again, you have the other side of what if you're collaborating with project partners, there's also processes, things that need to be in place. So making sure you follow the contractual, making sure the terms and conditions are followed, and ensuring all those processes just makes it a much more smoother management of the whole project. And then as soon as that is signed off, you can have your budget and you can start your project. So now that you've got your project, your funding, it's important to monitor your budget, and it's just really important to know where your money goes. So I think it's really important that you actually understand how to use, whether it's you have access to your financial system, or whether you have a monthly report. I'm not sure how it works here. Budget monitoring.
Periodical. It's periodical. Reporting, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautifully. So I think at Loughborough there's a bit of a mix. So academics they receive a monthly report for their spend, but some also have access to the financial systems, so they can kind of access their thing whenever they want to. But I think it varies. Education and how comfortable they are with using these systems and these reports really varies from person to person. And I do like some academics are really like almost scared of finance. You see the word finance and they're like, please help me. And they really need that extra support, which obviously we're happy to give. But I think it's incredibly important that if you feel comfortable, then you can make the decisions you want to make. So I think that's the key thing. Understanding your budget allows you to make informed decisions. So especially in the case of you want to have a no cost extension, or you need to change something due to one of the deliverables, and being able to be like, well, this is where my budget is currently at. This is what I can actually, what's really possible for me to do. It makes a world of difference than saying, oh my gosh, I have no idea why I spent this much money. And I think that's really important, is just feeling comfortable, and that's what the research office is there for, to help you feel comfortable with what you've been spending, whether that's literally providing you with a transaction list of every single transaction you spent, whether that's just giving you a general overview. It makes a difference for you to be in charge of your project on the financial side, not just the research side of it. So again, I've just done like a little example of a budget. So you were awarded a total of 465,000. It's been a set number of months and you've spent 314,000, and now you have 151,000 pounds remaining. And you would like to extend your project for whatever specific reason. And it's like looking at, okay, so I might have 151 as total, but realistically, what can I actually spend? And it's first things first, ignore the overhead. There's no change. You're not allowed to touch those. That is the law. Unfortunately,
Invisible.
it's invisible. It's almost as if it doesn't exist. And I think that's really important, because overhead, it takes out a lot of the budget, and it does stress you, because you think, wow, I can have up to this money, but look how much it's taking, and yeah. So that's really important. And then realistically, it's looking at, okay, I can only change my directly incurred costs, so staff, consumables, travel, and then only really changing staff if that's relative to the project, and you actually need to change that. So onto our final slide, which is just looking at funder requirements with post-award management. So financial reporting is absolutely important. It's what we live and breathe in the research office. And I think having that understanding from both sides, what do we need? So we do quarterly budget monitoring, we look at the transactions, make sure everything is working as it should be. Then you have invoicing, so whether that's invoicing based on actual expenditure or having invoicing based on pre-agreed milestones, which we typically see when we work with like the MOD, the defence and kind of government industry. Then we have a lot of interim reporting, which is done most commonly with our charities and sometimes with project partners. And then most people use the word is the financial expenditure statement. So this is where we review all the expenditure for all the projects, and it's a UKR requirement. So without this piece of work, we will not get the money. So we have to make sure it's all correct, and it's also meeting funder and audit requirements. And then, so at Loughborough, we have a compliance team, and they review all of these key processes. And they're also in charge of making sure all the processes are followed, and they're also in charge of introducing new compliance processes. So recently we've had something surrounding project closure, and this way it's ensuring that everything's done the same across the whole department. We've had a lot of new staff, so the knowledge has changed within the department. And then from a PI's perspective, it's better money management and understanding, right, this is what my project is. I don't want to overspend, and I don't want to underspend. And the advantages and disadvantages both. If you overspend, then we have to find somewhere else to move the balance to. And then if you underspend, you're not making full use, and it's like, is the project going in the way it should be? And then we have to return funds, which is not something that we want to do. And then again, it's complying with the funder and audit rules. It's making sure you're not moving money from project to project, and actually it's the right project that we're charging the funds to. So yeah, so overall, we have a lot of processes in place to ensure that from research office expectations, we're following, policies, and that when it comes to audit stage, everything is compliant. And we've had some really successful audits actually, where within one day of audit, they were happy with everything, and that was it. And that was amazing. Like, it's not
Dream come true.
Yeah, it's not something that happens often. And yeah, so thank you everyone.
Thank
you. Me.
Thank you,
If you have any
brilliant.
questions, please do not hesitate, and you can always contact me after if you have anything to let us know as well.
Thank you so much.